Welcome to another episode of Rose Resource Room. And today I am here with Christina, and I'm going to give Christina a moment to introduce herself, share how she knows me, and then we're just going to jump in. So, hey, Christina.
Hi, Rose. So good to see you. I am so excited to be a part of this podcast today. I've known you now, what, 2 years? I think it's been two,
Yeah,
right?
Tushia.
Two-ish years. We met at the Classical Conversations community out in Bayonne,
Mhm.
and I am a homeschool mom of two. I previously, prior to homeschooling, I was a corporate mom. I worked in the fashion industry for 15 plus years throughout the supply chain. I had a team, a global team that I've managed, and I decided to homeschool. Like, it's something I never thought I would do ever. And I am just so grateful for the opportunity. And I know even just meeting you and the time that I met you, I was thinking about leaving my job and was this the right move? And just finding that friendship, at such a critical time has been such a good experience for me and such a blessing. So now I am officially, gosh, a year not in the corporate space. And we are going to start homeschooling first grade in just a few weeks.
Woohoo. Yes, we did meet at a really good time, and I think our relationship started to blossom even more like after we both had our babies and like you weren't working, so we didn't have like the um conflict or the cumbersome schedule of having to be in like a ton of meetings. But what I have
Yes.
realized a lot is even though I don't know a lot about homeschooling or like the landscape, I do think the demographics have changed. Like it's a lot of corporate women who are either still
Yeah.
working their jobs and deciding to homeschool or who are just leaving the corporate world altogether and saying that. So I'm not sure if you're seeing that on your side too, or like if you have like a thought on like why people are even doing that.
Yeah, so I definitely think COVID, like that period of lockdown, definitely propelled a lot of people and stopped us in our tracks, like literally and figuratively. So, for me at the time, I'm obviously still working. I was in a global company and I was no longer traveling. So, when I was traveling 50% of the time. So I had my first in 2018. And then I was back to work when she was just 4 months old. And I mean, it's not at that point that I questioned it, right? Because it was like, I thought this is like what you do, right? So you just like, you just take it by the horns and you just go. And I went back to work in December of 2018, came back to work 2019 to a completely different boss and lots of shifts there and was promoted, and then it just became this cycle where I was traveling 50% of the time every other week. Now, granted, my daughter was in daycare. My husband was working. Of course, I believe in the village. My mother-in-law, my parents were incredibly supportive. And I think we just embraced this is what you do, right? Like I'm a corporate mom. Now I have this global team that I'm managing, and this is just what you do. And what I've noticed is that year, I survived. There was burnout periods without question, little pauses in between, but I got through it and there was a lot of friction. But I still thought that's what you do. And I think that's what a lot of parents are going through. It's like these norms, right? These like, this is how you're supposed to live your life. And then COVID happens and now we're home. And that was the big shift for me, as I know with a lot of people, right? Because it forced a much slower pace of
Mhm.
life, less distractions, right? In terms of just the busyness of the world and the busyness of our lives. And I'm not going to lie, I loved it. I was like, wow, it was the pause that I needed. And it was the pause that my family needed also to reconnect. And I think it shifted priorities a lot at that point. And from a work standpoint, we adjusted, right? I worked from home. I was having these global conversations that I would have had to have in person in years prior. Like we're connecting over Teams, we're connecting over Zoom. I was still very much connected to my clients at the time too. So we found this new way of working as a result of the new way we were living. And then in that, the shift in values, I think that is what has transpired in this homeschooling space, because COVID gave a lot of families the opportunity to be involved in the learning. And granted, for some people, they were like, no way, like I cannot do this. Leave it to the teachers, praise the teachers. And I agree. But for some people, it kind of lit a curiosity. And that's what happened to me specifically. I became curious, and I started reading books, and then I was like reading these books on the low too, like secretly, like listening on Audible. And I was like, wow, this is like a whole new world. And I don't know, it was just the beginning. But I think that is what's happening to a lot of families, right? They get a taste of it in some capacity or interest, and then they explore.
I think you nailed it because I remember being in the rat race, working in corporate, working in human resources, commuting to the city. Well, I lived in the city for some time and then I was taking the subway and then I moved to New Jersey and then I was taking everything, like from the light rail to the path to the subway just to get to
Mm,
34th Street. And you're in the rat race and it's just, this is what we do. Like we're New Yorkers, this is
exactly.
what we do, right? And then, like you said, there is a period where you kind of like have a moment to analyze and to kind of like reevaluate because in the moment, you're 100% right. This is what we do. I wasn't thinking about it. It was hard. I remember it being hard, but
Hmm.
I don't remember ever saying, I wonder if there's another way. I wonder if there's a better way, right? It was just go to sleep and do it all over again, right? And I remember when I first decided to start homeschooling education, it got to this point where it was like, this feels right. It's not that it was
Mm.
easy breeze. It's not like I never had a challenging day. It's not like there weren't hurdles and obstacles to overcome, but it felt right. Like I had this piece of I'm in the right space. And to your point earlier too about like, people are involved in the learning, they're seeing more. I remember my oldest one coming home and like sitting at his books until like 7:30 packed with homework and like I'm like this is a maybe he was 6 or 7. I'm like this is a 6-year-old's life. This is like we're preparing him for the rat race. Like if that's the education, you are being educated how to do the rat race. And I think from there it was like this concept of distinguishing between immutable laws and norms and ingrained beliefs. Right? My belief was you have to get up and go to work. You have to put your kids in daycare. You have to have someone else raise them after they turn a certain age. And that's what you do.
Exactly. Exactly. And then like the whole provider part of it too, right? Because that's like this is what we do in order to provide for our family. And I think that is, yeah, I think that for me, even just a year later, that is something that I'm constantly reframing, because in the position that I was before, there was like it was a very visible thing. Like this is how I provide for my family, as opposed to now defining that as really discipling our children, like being a part of their process, living life with them, living life alongside of them, engaging them in dialogue that quite honestly, I just would not have had the capacity to do before, right? Just because there was so many other things that were priorities. And I actually read this book. I want to say it's called like the common rule or the common something along that effect, and it's about motherhood. And it also like it blew my mind, right? Because it was the fact that we will experience friction when our priorities are not right, when our priorities are not right. And right, as women of faith, our priorities first is our prayer life, right? Our prayer life is number one, then our person, right? Our being, our body, right? Making sure that we're taking care of it. Then it's our partner, and being a partner, and being a parent, and then the last is being a provider. And in the book it says that you will experience friction when those priorities are not in that order. And that's something that I identify holistically, because when I was working full time and managing what I was managing, being a provider was my number one responsibility. Like that is what got me out of bed at 4 o'clock in the morning to get on a Zoom call, right? That was just like what I was doing and what I felt like this is what I need to do most importantly. And then it was like, okay, parent, right? I have to keep the kids alive and safe, right? So then it was like, then they were number two. And then it was like, okay, I'm married, my husband, right? And then it was like me and my prayer life. Yes, I was praying throughout it, but in terms of seeking that closeness spiritually first and finding strength, capacity, and purpose in that prayer life, that was like once I shifted like I flipped it literally from 5 to 1 to 1 to 5, that is when space happened, when I had capacity, when I had a sense of peace. And granted, like you said, there are still days, right? There are challenging days, and I will tell all the moms out there, I work harder every single day in this lifestyle than I did while I was working
And you
and
don't get
while I
paid.
was traveling. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So that is where I think that reframing those definitions is critical.
It is critical. And I love your perspective and like that mindset shift. Everything you said resonated so deeply because as you were speaking, I was like, wow, if I would lean into that intuition that I have, if I would lean into, wait, this doesn't feel right. I don't have peace. There's friction. What's going on? If we would
Mm-hmm.
even pause just for 5 minutes to say, why is there hesitation? Why is there reservation? Why doesn't this feel right? I think we would save ourselves so much. It's like sometimes we have to
Yeah.
go through all the things. And then when we get to that like roadblock, we're like, oh, I wasn't supposed to be doing that. I'm out of alignment, right? So everything you
Yes.
shared made so much sense. And the other piece too is like that financial piece that let me get up and be the provider. When you really start to put the priorities in order and understand that you are not the source, you may be a resource, but you are not the source, right?
Mm-hmm.
You start to recognize the faithfulness. Because I say it all the time. Like we went from two salaries and like a little $1,500 rent to one salary and like tripling our expenses. And I'm like, the math is not mathing. Like I'm good at math
Yes.
and that doesn't make any sense. Like we should be on the streets, foreclosed and the whole thing. And God has been so faithful, right? So it's like once all the
Mm-hmm.
parties start to fall in place, then you start to see the faithfulness. And I think it also makes you a better steward over your finances, over your time, over your resources, over your assets. Because I was the
Absolutely.
American Express swipe, American Express swipe. Like, oh, you don't want to give me a limit? Oh, I don't have a limit. Okay, swipe, right? So, like, instead of being a steward and saying, is this the best use of my time? Is this the best use of my money? I'm like, let's just do this. And sometimes it's like small spurt. It's like, kids, let's get ice cream. And sometimes it's, we're going on vacation. But now you have to be a better steward, which you were always supposed to be, right? Like, it shouldn't take
Absolutely.
a full lifestyle shift or lifestyle change for you to be an adult and actually use budgets and things of that nature. I'm like, I'll just track it. I'll just write it down after I spend it. No, like it really allowed me to get to another level of saying, do I need to spend this? Instead of, and like I wasn't big on like takeout, but like there's some days that I just wanted to get something, like very,
Yeah.
very infrequently because I cook a lot. But, it's not about this demoralizing life where you can't do anything. That's not what I'm saying at all. And it's not about like writing down every single penny, but it's about being a good steward over everything that you have. And that helps.
Yes. And that is a big shift that we made in our family. I entirely agree with you. And for us, we had to prepare, right? We had to prepare for this decision to homeschool, or at the time, it really wasn't for me to homeschool. So when I decided to leave, when I started the process of thinking of leaving work, it was because I reached that max point of friction, right? It was like, this is not what I want. This is not how I want to spend my time. This is not how I want to feel, right? In terms of the stress, the burnout, and also feeling insufficient in so many other areas of my life and not prioritizing the core relationships with my children and my husband and my family. So for me, it was first like once I hit that point of like, this is not what we want for ourselves, we had to make a plan, right? My husband and I, at the time, I was the primary breadwinner. So it was like, how can we do this? And it's exactly what you're saying in terms of being a steward of your resources, of your skills too. And like thinking outside of the box in terms of how can we earn income? How can we continue to create financial security for our family? And so we prepared, and it took us 2 years. It really took us 2 years just to get our financial ducks in order. And then, so when I did quit my job, I quit it with like 100% conviction. Like, I was like, I am done. Thank you very much. And I was able to walk away with such a sense of peace. So I think that preparation, and then even on the other side of it, now being down to one income, we still continue to make those choices, but those choices are somewhat easier to make, right? Because in terms of, you're saying those lifestyle choices, right? The discretionary spend
Yeah.
choices, they're easier to make because you're not feeling, again, the burnout, the friction, the
Hmm.
like work hard, play hard mentality. Okay, I haven't been here for a few weeks, so let's like make it extra special. Or I am just so tired, I can't even muster up an ounce of energy to cook, so let's
Yeah.
just go out to
Right.
eat.
Right.
So it's like you find like it becomes easier and you adjust without sacrificing. Like I never feel like I'm sacrificing now, as opposed to before I felt like I was sacrificing my time all the time.
That is such an interesting shift, right? Because you would think, oh, I don't I'm on one income, I need to do all these things, but like the freedom and all the things that you thought you wouldn't have as a result of making the shift, you actually had more of that. So it's interesting. And
Yes.
that's why we need to pause and get out of the rat race and the hustle mentality and actually sit and think and wonder and like do all the things.
And breathe, right? Like that's what it comes down to, is just breathing right now, and just and having faith, right? Having faith that it will work out as it always does.
Hmm. It's so funny. I was thinking about that yesterday. I have a colleague who was going through something, and I was going to send her a message that was encouraging. And the only thing that I could think of is it's going to work out in the end. And there's this little cheesy, corny thing that says, it will work out in the end. No, it will be okay in the end. And if it's not okay, it's not the end. And like it
Mm.
sounds so cheesy and like toxic positivity,
Yes.
like idealistic, but it's so true. Like once you're in this phase and you're like, this doesn't feel right, this doesn't feel right. It's just not the end. The chapter's not over, but at the end of this chapter, it will work out. I promise you.
Yes.
So one of the things you talked about earlier was like your tribe and your village and your community. And I remember us talking briefly about an initiative that you went on where you did this whole research thing and you just knew that your initial hypothesis was right, and then something else came up. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, absolutely. So, now being, as I said, in this homeschool space for going on 2 years, I have been very curious and wanting to give something back to the homeschool community. So I'm very fortunate that I was a part of a co-op, right, for a year and a half, and I loved it, and I was in community. And I just wanted to think of, like, I was trying to think of something that I can offer not only the community that I was in, but just homeschoolers in general. Like, I felt like I mean, I believe in this lifestyle more than anything. And I'm like, how can I make this more accessible for other people? And so I started a few months ago. I did a market research study where I interviewed, gosh, like 12 families, 12 different families, and was able to just get some initial insights. What keeps you up at night? What are you struggling with? Where do you feel like you need immediate help right now? And I was a little bit surprised by it, right? Because I went into it with like my own, like, they're going to say it's living on one income, right? Because that's a challenge. And how do we make this sustainable? And it did not come up in conversation, not meaning that's not a challenge for some families. And there are options for that. But what came up universally in every single interview, regardless of if it was a new homeschooler, a veteran homeschooler, a child of a preschooler, a child of a high schooler, what came up was the need for community, right? The need for community, the need for shared resources, the need to do life with other women that are on the same path, the same journey. And so I was like, at first I was like, what? So I was surprised, and I was like, okay, I was like, I agree, right? But at the same time, I agree. And I was a part of a community, and even people who are part of co-ops or hybrid schools, they too want more, right? They want to be part of, whether it's a larger organization. I think it's more so this need to cross pollinate ideas, right? What are you working on? How do you troubleshoot this particular challenge? How do you schedule? How do you cook? And like whatever it is, I think everyone has questions and they want to know what someone else is doing. So, and then also just the need for community, not just for themselves, right? But also for their children and their spouses. And so I was like, okay, at first I didn't know what to do. And I prayed on it and I spoke to other people who run communities and just to see like what works for them. And I was encouraged to host my first event, my first homeschool mom mixer and workshop. We had it in June and it was amazing. It was amazing. And it was all these women that came together in person, in real life, and just connected. Strangers from the internet, really, that just came together and came for fellowship, really came for fellowship and just left with so much more. And that's something that I want to continue to do go forward. So we are having another event. We're going to have an event in October. October 5th, yes. And I want to keep that format of workshop and mixer because I think it's the balance of two. I think it's the balance of finding community, connecting with community, but also sharing resources, sharing best practices. And so that's something that we're doing, and we're going to do it both online. I have an online community as well. So we're going to do it online and in person. So just to give women that flexibility, because I know sometimes life happens and you can't show up in person, but you still want to connect with other people. So we will have virtual co-working sessions. We'll have virtual mama matchmaking, just to just give people the opportunity to connect when they can, when they need to. And I also have some plans in terms of how we can incorporate the kids in the future, maybe doing some service projects. So I'm super excited about this initiative. And at my first event, what I saw was vulnerability, right? I saw women openly, unapologetically sharing what they're going through. And another woman across the room, not even having any personal relationship with her, offering her support, offering her an option, offering what she did with her child, and seeing another one hugging her while she's like, it was just such a beautiful space. And that's something that is my sole responsibility in doing this, is just providing that space for women. Because I've gone to plenty of networking events that is just, you don't feel that. You don't feel comfortable to be vulnerable. You don't feel comfortable to show up as you are. You feel like you need to have it all together. You feel like you need to pitch someone what you're working on, right? Fake it till you make it. We are not faking it here. We are just coming authentically. And so for me, that is like the number one priority, is just creating that safe space.
So I am never busy on weekends. Like I'm so stingy with my weekends and like I usually have nothing going on. And that one weekend that my girlfriend said, "Hey, let's get together." That's the weekend that she had the mix. And I'm still so sad that I missed it, but I'm super excited. Like when we talked about it and what you shared. So what I'm hearing is that people, even though they join co-ops and they meet once a week or they meet twice a week and they do all those things, those are curated, right? Like you go
Mhm.
and you have to do this from 10 to 11 and you do this at 1 o'clock and then you dismiss at this time. People just want to do life together. Like it's the
Yes.
conversation where like I texted you and you're like, "Hey, let's meet this time." And we took a walk and so much came out of it, right? Like so much
Hmm.
um healing and just like it was like a retreat for like the 1 hour or 2 hours or however long we're together. But I think that's what people want. People want to be able to say, "Hey, I'm stuck on this. What did you do? Have you ever experienced this?" Or, "Hey, can I just bounce this idea off of you?" And like sometimes when you're in the curated space of a co-op or a community, you don't always have that time, right? So I think what you're doing is creating this space where people can talk to each other, they can have diverse perspectives, they can meet in person, like in real life. And I just think it's so amazing what you're doing. So I'm excited. Two things you mentioned that I didn't hear before. Um, the mama matchmaking sounds amazing. And then you said like the service projects. I could totally see you doing like play dates with the kids, but also what is community service? What does it mean to have purpose like as a little kid? I love it.
Yes. 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 Yeah, so we're really excited. That's where one of the feedbacks. So at the event at the June event that we had, I had a survey, and because I really wanted to hear, and this is something that I intend to do to every single event, whether it's in person or virtually, is having feedback, getting that constant feedback of what you need right now, because the seasons change, right? The seasons change. You think and then like you're in groove, right? You got it, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh man, now this next challenge. So I want to create something where I can get that ongoing feedback, get other people involved too, right? This is not something that I want to do just for myself. So it's how can we get other people involved in the process of planning and executing these events? And then what really came up, like again, throughout the event surveys was how can we incorporate our kids or can we incorporate our husbands, right? There was definitely so that's something that I'm thinking about right now. The focus is the mom, right? And that's where like so for the October event and the November event, they will be focused on the mom, and then for the December event, we will have the family incorporated. So more to come.
I love it. I love it. I love it. And it's so funny how we always find something to like keep us occupied, but it's not like busy work, it's purpose work, right? It's not like, oh, I'm so
Mm,
bored. I have so much time on my hands because that is not my experience. Like I am busy, but it's how can we get back to the community? What do people need? What are those gaps? How can I fill them? Right. So I think it's amazing.
yes.
So what else is going on? What do we have going on this weekend?
So we are just enjoying these last 2 weeks, right? So we're starting a new hybrid school in September. So that will be meeting once a week. And so I just wanted to take the next, Gianna, my oldest, is finishing up her last week of summer camp this week. And then so we'll have 2 weeks off of just nothingness and play dates. And I mean, the weather has been beautiful. So it's like, how can we just be outside even more? And so we're just relaxing, spending time with each other, and then we'll start school on the 9th.
So I do remember you sharing that in a text message and the part when you said embrace the last 2 weeks of like just nothingness and doing nothing. I'm like, what a novel idea. Because like my calendar's always so full. I'm like, no, seriously, we have like 2 seconds of warm weather. Like, why are we at home behind a book or like behind a screen? Like, get out, right? So we've been to the beach
Yes.
probably only twice because of all the rain, or the kids had tennis for like the first 6 weeks. And I'm like, that's all summer. We have 2 weeks left, right? So there was
Yeah.
always something going on. And even though they loved it, it was just always this schedule and this, routine. So like when you send that text about like just really embracing and like pushing back and not, because it's so like everyone around me is like, okay, we started. And I've done so many fall starts. Like every Monday, I'm like, we're started. I'm like, no, we're not. But like when you send that text person, I'm like, no, for real. What does that look like? Do we go to the lake? Do we go to the beach? Do we go to the amusement park? Do we do all of the things? So I really appreciate that perspective of slowing down and understanding that we have their lives to be with them, right? So it's not, I have to teach you all 12 years of math this week, right? Like we have a long.
Exactly. We have time and it's going to happen regardless. And I know, like for us, I know for especially from last year, right? Last year was like our first, like true, like full school year trial between schooling, homeschooling, co-op, and then the extracurriculars. And it was wild. I mean, it was insane. But I think I'm like, we reflect and we learn from past experiences. And I, going into the kindergarten year, right, I was like socializing, right? I need to make sure she's socializing like 4 days a week. So we're going to do this on this day, this. And without even realizing now, even when like people who are curious about homeschooling and they're like, what about socializing? I'm like, I laugh because I'm like, they socialize more than you can ever imagine. Their socialization is the least of my worries, right? Because they're socializing all day long, right? They're
I know.
socializing with all ages, with in real life, like running errands, going to the park, being in the co-op, being in their extracurricular activities. So it was definitely like a total like newbie homeschool mom, but I had to like schedule something Monday through Thursday, and it was awful because like
It's
each time
awful.
we got right, it was like it was awful. By the time I made it to December, I was like, I just had to like take a deep breath because it brought me back to that rat race in so many ways. And feeling like I'm constantly in the car, shuttling her from left to right, and also doing this with a toddler. I was like, what was I thinking? So this year. That's why I'm telling you that's why I have no qualms about my 2 weeks of nothingness before the school year, because I know very naturally it's going to ramp up because it just does. And so another thing that I did differently is we have our co-op that meets on Wednesday. Co-op school, it's a full day. It's from 9:30 to 3:30. So we'll have school on Wednesdays, and then I'm just doing activities on Monday and Wednesday. That's it. So yes, we will homeschool on Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. Absolutely. We'll be working on things at home. But in terms of required activities outside the home, Monday, Wednesday. So I'm trying it out. We're going to see. I'll let you know how it goes, but I'm looking forward to it because I really felt that was what was missing last year, right? Just giving more natural pauses in the day. And also, I feel that it's going to be beyond, like, it's going to be so educational for Gianna too, right? In terms of having more time to learn, having more time to dig deeper into subjects, dig deeper into learning and play, and not feel like, okay, gotta go, we gotta get there. So it's starting, as I said, next week with like the do nothing and
Hmm.
then have more space throughout the school year.
So I love that for you. And I am secretly hoping that for myself because last night I sat on the couch and I said, okay, I think we're doing okay. On Mondays, we're gonna have piano. But then I joined this co-op because I live so close to Staten Island. I joined a co-op in Staten Island and they meet on Mondays. So
Oh,
I'm like, okay, we'll have co-op and then we'll have piano. That's not terrible. And then Tuesdays it looks completely clear. I'm like, okay, we're good. Wednesdays, the boys I told you at 7, they have this like it's kind of like Boy Scouts, but it's called Royal Rangers. And then Thursdays we had nothing. And then Friday we had this other thing, this other boys club that they do only once per month. So that was what we're up to. But then I was like, oh, but we didn't schedule swim yet, and we didn't schedule soccer. And soccer's normally 2 days, either Monday, Wednesday, or Tuesday, Thursday. And then we were doing guitar last year on Tuesdays, but then we picked it, it dropped for the summer. So we picked up piano, but now they're like, we want to do piano and guitar, and we want to do swim and soccer. And I'm like, listen, it is bad enough that I'm your Uber driver. Something has to go. So in
yes.
the summers, we'll do tennis and piano. We can't keep piano, but we're dropping tennis. If you want to pick up guitar, something has to go. So I'm like looking at my schedule and loving the fact that I have nothing on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And even that thing I have on Fridays is only once per month. But I'm like,
Yes.
it's gonna ramp up, isn't it? It's gonna ramp up.
It's gonna ramp up, but that is, you already have that space, right? That like preset space. Like, do not give in to anything. Like, keep it as it is. Like, let's challenge ourselves this year
Yes.
just to do it a little differently and see how we feel, how they feel. And I do think magic will happen. Like, I think it will be a blessing for our family. And then in terms of like telling them no, right? Like saying like you
Mm.
have to pick, right? Like that is the
Yeah,
reality. Like in life you have choices, and you have like, it's, you can't have all the choices all the
exactly.
time. So I think like having them own the process too is important.
And they've experienced that too, because I am no stranger to telling these kids no. But I remember there was one Wednesday that I don't understand why everybody decided this was the day to do something, but there was like a movie in the park. There was their stand-in event of Royal Rangers. There was some swim thing that they wanted to go to, and like literally like one more thing. I can't remember the fourth thing. And I said, you can't be in two places at once. And what I'm not going to do is drive one person to one thing and one to the other. So you two have a conversation, decide if you want to do the stand-in thing that you've done, decide if you want to do this new thing and skip that standing thing for this week, decide if you want to do that other thing, but we're going to one place, and once you make the decision, that's it. There's no back and forth, right?
Yes.
Because I feel like I'm not very good about like giving them a ton of choices. So like in this space, I'm like, you can only go to one, you get to choose. Like I don't want the headache of having to choose. So I'm giving them the autonomy, but also giving them the lessons of this is real life. Everything's not going to be perfect. There are going to be things that are conflicting, and you have sometimes conflicting priorities and conflicting demands, and you have to make a decision, and then you just have to live with that decision, right? So this is real life.
Yes.
This is what we're doing. Like it's not about math. It's not about the subjects. Education is life. Like this is what we're
Hmm.
doing. So we're doing it
Yes.
all the time. So do you have any thoughts, any final thoughts you want to share with any mama out there who's either on the fence about home-centered education or homeschooling, or in the trenches and thinking about quitting? Like anything you want to share with anyone who may be listening?
Yes. So two things, right? So I would say in terms of the mom that's curious, start reading some books, start having conversations, get in those Facebook groups and just listen and see and explore it for yourself. And there's a way that you can trial it, right? You can trial it in the early stages. Let's say your child's in school or your child's in preschool or in another grade. Just being more involved, it'll be like the first test and trial to see if this is something that you will actually want to do, and exploring different subjects with them too. Like that's something that I did with Gianna while I was working, right? I became more involved in her preschool education, and it lit the fire in me to learn more. And it gave me the confidence, like, yeah, of course I can do this. So that would be for like the one that's curious. And then of course, like seeking community, right? There is plenty of opportunities, right? So you can get on Facebook, you can find me, right? You can find me on Instagram. And I will also share with Ro the link to our next event, right? So we are planning to have events in New Jersey every first Saturday. So every first Saturday. So our first one will be October 5th, and then the next one will be November 2nd. And they will be in-person events. So I will share that link with Ro, and I will also share the link with Ro in terms of our membership community online as well. So if anyone wants to join virtually, we have, like I said, the virtual events, but community is everything. So whether you're new to it, and that's what I saw for the people who came to my event, like the people, that room was diverse, and that is my goal all the time. I want to provide, as I said, a safe place, but I also want to provide a room of diversity in the sense of whether they're new to homeschooling, whether they're thinking of homeschooling, whether they are a veteran homeschooler, someone who has been homeschooling the entire time, right? There's so much that can be learned and experienced from each other, right? There's not one person that has all the answers, but we can learn from each other and we can support each other. So if you're in the trenches and you're like, I'm about to give up, find a friend, right? Like homeschooling is so much better with community, with friends, with women that you can just vent to, and women who get it, who
Yeah,
get what you're going through.
yeah. I do love that because when you were saying that, it reminded me that we are our children's first and best teachers. Like we're their primary teachers. Like we walk with the little babies and we're like, oh, look the bird. Oh, that's red. That's a tree. And then all of a sudden they get to like 4 or 5 and we're like, oh, can't do this anymore. We were doing it all the time. But it's really that mindset shift that you talked about in the beginning of reframing and shifting your mindset and pausing and saying that feeling that you feel when you're about to give them over to the institution, lean into it and figure out why you feel that way.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So thank you so, so much for your time today. You know, I can keep you here all day. We need to get together in real life. Um, and then we'll figure out next steps. I look forward to seeing you soon.
I look forward to seeing you.
Thank you.